Hello, my loves! Today's story is about a man that felt entitled to kingly power with a monstrous ego, who inherited massive wealth, married multiple women, and I mean multiple, crushed his enemies, and were obsessed with erecting massive structures. Care to find out to whom I, the Almighty, am referring? You won't believe it when you hear it, I promise. Actually, who else could it be? Hello, Shalom, loves. It is I, God, or Jehovah in today's instance, because I will be talking about David's son, King Solomon the Wise. Woo! Rather, in the Hebrew version, his name is Shlomo, and I shall henceforth be calling him that in this video. Now, Shlomo was one of us most champion lads, until he wasn't. Shlomo was the second son of King David, or David, as his name is in Hebrew, to Bathsheba, or Bathsheba. Remember her? Huh? She's the bird that inspired David to play the chord Watch and Obey, and later whose husband David sent off to war and died. Ooh, yay for deception. It gets the job done, doesn't it? A few years later, she and David had children, but the most important one is Shlomo, even though he's the second. Controversial. The first one were an abomination that mullered because of David's sinful nature having conquered Bathsheba. At least that's what some of the stories would have you believe. I'd never do that, would I? Would I? Would I? Shlomo then became king at age 12 after his father passed, even though his father had reigned for 40 years. So you do the maths on that one, eh? It's all the rage now that blokes have babies at old age, but fads are simply cyclical, eh? Not wrong with that, I say. I mean, look at me! There were a dispute as to whom the actual king was, because Bathsheba and David had planned for Shlomo to take the crown. There were also a prophet named Nathan that prophesied that Shlomo would be king, who had a thing for young Shlomo, as he gave him a nickname, as it were, Jedediah, or Yedida in Hebrew, which means gift from God. Me, by the way, as if it was some country bumpkin from rural Alabama spitting his tobacco in the old saloon, dagnammit. Arguably, however, the rightful heir for this bloke named, wait for it, Adonijah. Yeah, Adonijah. Adonijah were essentially a spoilt brat that was David's eldest living son, and David catered to his every whim, which even included the crown itself. Just a couple of menches cutting it up, and by it, I mean the relatively embryonic kingdom of Israel. At least that's how Adonijah perceived it. So what is Israel to do? They fought over it. Yay! Ambiguity! Ambiguity. I love a bit of ambiguity in my mysteries, this I do. David was still alive at this point, and he knew that I were well fed up of him, that his time were coming to an end soon, and that I had to choose a successor. So he and Bathsheba went and took Shlomo on a mule at the age of 12 and anointed him as the next king. Now, you can imagine how much this peeved off old Adonijah, so he then plotted to take over by marrying David's widow, once he died, of course, to wrest power from his half-brother Shlomo. This finally forced Shlomo to off Adonijah, so they had that going for them, didn't they? I must admit that brotherhood is more deadly than not in my story, isn't it? Who'd want a brother? Mind you, that Shlomo is a young lad of 12 at this point, and he's already mullering family members to maintain power. I mean, what a greater test is there for a young king than killing off his own family in order to sit on the throne that some prophet who renamed him said he'd have anyway? Well, is there a greater test? Do you presume to know more than the Almighty? Want some strawberries? I liked Shlomo. I mean, he were a good chap, doing what I wanted at that point, but he were well insecure.
Hi, God, it's me, your devoted follower, Shlomo. I need to ask for something.
He actually came up to me and asked me for some. Can you believe that? I've dealt with a fair share of kings and they always wanted the same thing. But no, not Shlomo. I asked him what he wanted, even though I already knew because, well, yeah, you know.
I want to be wise. Don't smite me, please.
Well, this didn't surprise me, yeah, for obvious reasons. Really? I know everything. How could anything surprise me? This were a champion question because every single king always asked me for more wealth. So I granted him wisdom, and because I were in a giving mood, I also gave him the ability to be a champion musician, who even came up with the Song of Solomon, which we'll get to later, the power to control demons, because you never know when that might come in handy, right? The ability to understand the language of animals, just like his dad, well, the Islamic version anyway, and Dr. Dolittle, along with making him a brilliant botanist and zoologist. Why? Why the bloody hell not?
Are you questioning us, judgment? Bacon sandwiches.
I'm hungry today. Shlomo got to flex his wisdom by choosing not to split a baby. Weird. And marrying loads of women to consolidate power, as that were the best way to build his empire. And when I say loads, I mean loads. Like Wilt Chamberlain loads, but marrying them. Mad. It were no coincidence that male sexuality peaks around this age. Or were it? Back then, a king or ruler would unite different lands by uniting with that land's ruler's daughter. Fitting that this video is coming out right around Valentine's Day, isn't it? And you can find out more about that in some other place. Look, I already do plenty for you, so you can find that chap on your own, okay? Right, young Shlomo were quite fond of ladies, although he might not say it, it were true love, but he claimed,
I wanted to bring them closer to you, God, for you have given me so much, like all this wisdom and knowing what the Anna Boredom Sinicaraphalum or Vormula Perignuser is, now I could win Jeopardy if the only categories of botany and zoology if it weren't to exist for 2,000 years.
Well, that's what he claimed anyway, because these women would have had their own cultures and, that's right, religions and deities from their respective regions. However, later on, he was all into these outside gods and...
Not wise, Shlomo.
Not God-given bloody wisdom at all, Shlomo. You won't be able to identify the species of the burn I inflict upon you. Anyway, it was Shlomo's 4th year in power, and the 16-year-old boy had plenty of work to do, especially when it came to... That's right, building shit. David were planning on building a massive holy temple to honour me because... Well, don't I deserve it?
Oh, yes, I deserve that and so much more. So much more!
Now David had buggered off here to sing at my side, but he weren't pure enough when he were on earth, so he hadn't completed the temple to worship me. Therefore, it was Shlomo's job to do, because he were a reet champion bloke and well clever at the time. You see, not just anyone can go about building the house of God. No, it must be someone that's bloody well perfect and well wise for not only the building's construction, but for others to believe that it were by us hands. Yeah? Does that make sense? Do you get me? Pay attention! For people to worship me, then they must believe that someone worthy of building the temple could have done it. So, Shlomo became well obsessed on this construction project. The temple itself is a makkah that come from Shlomo knocking about with the king of Tyre, named Hiram, who was his dad's gladly mate. Can you guess what Hiram provided? Wrong! Of course he couldn't provide rubber, as you lot hadn't gotten round to inventing it yet. Oh, I swear, did I give all this wisdom to Shlomo? Did I? You're thick, you lot, thick! No, Hiram had access to loads of cedar trees that the Israelites used to build the temple, along with a whole slew of other items that some stories like to say were from Israelites that David, conscripted. However, it was slaves, and there's no shame in that. Oh, actually, there's a great deal of shame in that, because many believers would rather not admit to the temple being a byproduct of slavery. Well, that's history, isn't it? This happened over 7 years, and Shlomo then became well chuffed with his construction. So chuffed was he that he decided to construct an opulent palace that were larger than the temple itself. You can only imagine how I took that, huh?
Cheeky. Oh, I tell you what, I was not happy at all.
And I wasn't. I weren't that insecure. No, never. Shlomo kept building more and more grander things all across the area, and that were not my cuppa. But we may get to that another time. Well, my loves, that were only the beginning of Shlomo and his buildings, on which I may elaborate at a later date. I already know whether I will or not, but that is another one of us mysteries for you lot to suss out on your own. Remember, as always, to like, subscribe and share these videos and channels. The more popular I get, the better I look. That's been the whole basis of us religions, if you think about it. Don't think about it. Ta-ra, me loves, ta-ra. Oh, I do love you. Subscribe, that is, my children. Now share, like, and leave a comment. I get lonely sometimes and I love me some questions, and hey, remember, soon you'll be able to follow me on other social media channels. You will.